Hi, I'm Paul Preiss. I'm the CEO and founder of ISA. We are the largest nonprofit association for all architects. With me today on the argument is Jacqui Read, who is the mistress of visual communication and documentation and making great architectural decisions. That's kind of how I think of you. I like your blog, so it's where I go to read about and discuss these things. So, Jacqui, welcome.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here, and hello to everyone listening as well. Thank you very much for inviting me onto the argument.
So you just told me that your GitHub handle you made when you were 18. Like, tell us your tell. And this is the first time I've gotten to have you on. So how'd you get here? You know, you're one of the top thought leaders requested for keynotes around the world for software architecture. That is a very competitive kind of place. How did you? What was your path?
Well, so yes, I did come up with that Techie Girl handle when I was 18, and that was actually quite a long time before I got into software development. I went to some other areas first, including doing a bit of primary school teaching in the UK after I did my degree, and then I came back into IT after that and started out in .NET development to begin with, and did that for quite a few years, going through different companies, different areas. So I worked in education, in security, in finance, in different areas like that. And then I kind of took the plunge into architecture when I was kind of pushed out of a role because the role was made redundant, and kind of decided to take that leap and believe in myself. I was looking at other developer roles, but people didn't really want to pay me enough. And so I looked at architecture roles and stepped into one at a company that didn't have quite enough money to pay me as a developer, but did for an architect. So it's always worth looking at different roles if you can't get quite what you want.
Oh, I'd love to come back to that relationship, that engineer to architect transition space. But so you went from primary school teacher to dealing with IT people. So it was a sort of step down in maturity, right? Is that what you?
Yeah,
like,
just
yeah. You were kind of prepared for the tantrums already. Okay, so it's nice being a software architect. I don't always get software architects on the program. So we do a lot of business architects and information and infrastructure and really, chief architects and things like that too. So this is my depth area. So it's always for me very exciting because I feel like I get to talk about the part of the special part of architecture that I love.
Yes.
To get started, I kind of called you a leader in visual communication and communication and architecture. And, as I tease our IT colleagues about our maturity levels, but it is an intense place to communicate very intense and complex ideas. How do you approach that to start? And what techniques are really, have you found that you teach and that resonate the best with teams to lead and facilitate at the same time
I think one of the key things that I really do is a lot of collaboration techniques. I really like using these kind of techniques, especially if you're trying to get business and tech to talk to each other. And so using things like event storming and domain storytelling, those two I really like doing. And domain storytelling is quite useful if you're trying to also onboard yourself onto a new project. So I use it to literally with a whiteboard and a team, and I ask them to tell me what the project is about, what the product's about. And I write it down as a domain story or series of domain stories, quite sort of high level. And then they can see exactly what I am understanding, and they can correct me if I haven't understood something. And it's quite useful because people, if they have documentation, it's usually not sort of easy to understand or complete. And so having that is very useful to onboard yourself into these teams. So yeah, collaborative approaches are really what I try and use to get people actually talking to each other, although a lot of people don't go into software to talk to other people. So you really have to kind of pull it out of them and help people feel like they're in a safe environment. There's a lot of talk at the moment about people feeling sort of safe at work and things. So trying to encourage people to collaborate with each other is one of the biggest things, I think, at the moment.
You know, I was talking to somebody about in one of our other forums about the nature of collaboration in highly technical teams, and that we tend to be very, for lack of a better word, left-brained, in the sense that it's not emotional safety isn't always one of those things. But how do you extract stories out of that community? How do you navigate? You're talking about, tell us more about the domain storytelling, in the sense of, like, how do I run that, and how do I help a team tell those stories, or understand how to create a narrative?
Well, I'd recommend everyone have a look at the website. It's very easy to find if you do a search for it. But with domain storytelling, the idea is that you split things down into very kind of concise stories. So there's no kind of ifs or buts in them. It's just one important kind of domain story. And so you have people in it, you have systems. It's very useful if you're trying to go from what is not a digital system to a digital system. So you can start by creating the non-digital system first, and then you can start translating it into the digital system. But with a domain story, you have the people, you have artifacts. So one of the examples they use is for a cinema, I believe it is. And so there are tickets that get kind of passed around, and really it can be the same ticket. It can be the ticket that is picked up by the person where it's printed out and handed to someone, or it can be sort of a digital sort of version of that ticket. And so you get this whole story. It's all numbered, so you can navigate through it. But the idea is that you keep to just that story, whereas if you are event storming, you tend to get a lot of things going sort of all across the board, and all the different possibilities. So it's much more focused.
Do these techniques, how do these techniques translate to, say, working software in your mind? I mean, because obviously there's the collaborative aspect of that, but then obviously the impetus and momentum of the teams and stakeholders is, what do we use this? Can we use this in in productive ways for our breaking out for collaboration, but then into our actual delivery?
Yeah, I think a lot of people say, oh, I've got all this event storming sort of output and stuff, but what do I actually do with that? And I think that's where a lot of teams kind of fall over, is that they don't then sort of translate that into the next version. And so a lot of these collaborative techniques, they have different levels. So they've got the higher level version, and then you can go into the lower versions. So with event storming, I think there are 3 different flavors. I'm not sure if I can remember what they are off the top of my head, but they've got the very high level one, and then you've got one that is sort of for actually starting to design that sort of the processes or the actual software. And so you still end up with kind of all these sticky notes or these kind of icons, and then you need to then translate that further. And I think that's probably where we really get into the realms of how architects can use these. So if you might be the facilitator for these workshops, but you also probably end up being this translator, and it might be architects, it might be tech leads, but you actually need to then translate that into something that is a design, rather than sort of lots of sticky notes. And so you're kind of getting from this high level and getting lower and lower. And I think at this point, this is where people again say, oh, but what do I do with all these kind of photos of sticky notes or whiteboards of sticky notes? And that's the point where you really need to mark them as like old. You've got like a date, like this is this is now out of date because now we're using these new designs, and if anything new happens, we're going to be adding it into these new designs. And so marking things as not in use anymore is really a very important thing with documentation, because you want people to know that it's not the latest version and where they want to go to, and you don't want to be trying to keep up to date all this different documentation that it isn't really used anymore. So point people to the newest version all the time.
Right. What's the so I guess we went through a phase of effectively pushback against this architect and documentation, and I feel like that's always a pendulum in almost in every team that I interact with, and they're somewhere in their learning journey, right? On how much is too much and how much is too little. How do you approach that to get the right balance of design artifacts, thinking, structural artifacts, cross-team collaboration, to be able to get kind of an optimum delivery rate, but not reduce quality?
Yeah, I think with documentation, a lot of people have kind of strayed sort of away completely from documentation and got the wrong idea with like the Agile Manifesto. It didn't say don't document, it just said like working code over comprehensive documentation. So we don't need completely comprehensive documentation, but we need to be able to understand the system we're working on, and we need new people to be able to understand, because if you don't understand it, that is when you're going to end up with these big balls of mud. And I think a lot of people who are trying to translate legacy into a new system fall over at this point because they don't understand the legacy system. So how can they create a new system that is going to work any better than the legacy does? And so it's about having the right documentation, and there's no silver bullet for this. This is going to be different for different teams and different companies and different departments in that company. There's not going to be any one like, oh, you must use this type, you must always include this in your documentation. And one of the ways I like to approach documentation is to do it as it's needed. And so if, say, someone asks a question, then instead of answering it in an email or your Slack chat or whatever, because then that answer then gets lost and not everyone can access it, what you can do is you can answer with a link to your documentation. And if the answer isn't in your documentation, guess what you need to do? You need to add it to your documentation and then send the link. Or if the answer's out of date, you need to update it and send the link. So that means that you just add to and maintain over time. Because I find that if you say, oh, we need to do this every month or every 6 months, one, it doesn't happen. And two, it's much harder to then catch up than it is to just generally keep up with things. It's like kind of like, imagine like maintaining your kitchen at home. If you don't do anything for a week, you then have to spend hours trying to sort out your kitchen and do all the washing up. But if you do the washing up or the dishwasher on a daily basis, then it's so much easier and it takes you 10 minutes a day.
Trying to decide. Of course, I'm probably like most of our listeners, trying to think about which ones of those I am. Am I the clean it on Sunday or do it every day person? What do you think is what was some of the learnings that you had when you went from engineer to architect about designing well and being able to understand what's important, right? We talk about architectural decisions and it always comes down to Martin's, whatever the important stuff is in a way. But what is that for you? Like you're looking at a systems just requirements or documentation or ideas, and you have to make decisions about patterns and other things. Can you narrow that kind of decisioning method down for us and how that relates to documentation and collaboration?
Yeah, I can definitely talk about sort of decision records and things, but what you said initially about what I think is really kind of important in making these designs, I think it really is down to communication and people. Those
Mm.
are the kind of underlying things when it comes to, well, anything in the world. It's all about communication and people. And we can't get away with that, even if we are in this kind of digital software world. And that's one of the reasons that I wrote my book, Communication Patterns, because I wanted to kind of give people these patterns and anti-patterns, because people in software are used to seeing things stated that way. But for these, what people tend to call soft skills, but they're actually the hardest skills, really. So I don't call them soft skills, I call them core skills. So that's why I'm pushing everybody to start calling them now, because they really are core skills for anyone who wants to get anywhere in their careers, really.
Well,
So I think that's
I want to
the
throw in I
underlying
want to
thing.
throw in official support that our competency model in ISA, known as the core competency model, has communication as a fundamental tenet in human dynamics. So I am
Excellent.
utterly 100% behind you, because thousands of surveys have said exactly what you just said. So anybody who wants to be an architect should just take what you said to heart and immediately buy this book and start studying, whether you're, you know, how did you feel like you were a natural communicator?
I don't know. I think a lot of what I've put in the book is kind of things that I naturally did. So I hadn't really thought about it before, but maybe I am sort of more of a natural communicator and sort of collaborator. But some of what's in the book is from sort of lots of different different areas. So some of it comes from things like personal knowledge management, which is a really big area, not connected to software and architecture. But I'm one of these people who kind of looks at all these different areas that are really quite far apart. I'm definitely not a T-shaped person. I'm more of a sort of M, or I don't know. There's it's more than three, I think. I'm a
You,
this shaped person. Sort of, I don't know.
the
I'm a spider
Microsoft,
shaped person. There we go.
yeah, I had a Microsoft guy say, "I'm not T-shaped, I'm tree-shaped," and I thought that was brilliant
Oh, that's a
because,
good one. Yes, tree shaped.
yeah, it also doesn't make me feel kind of nervous about spiders and stuff. Like, oh
Yeah.
wait.
Yeah, tree shaped. I'm going to use that from now on. That's a really good one.
What's what do you feel like? Okay, so specifically in the book, because I've got it in my downloads, and I'm like, it's in my reading queue, um, and so I wish you could see everybody who bought one. Wouldn't that be cool if you're like the names came through and you'd be like, I saw that you bought my book.
Yeah,
Um,
that'd be great.
but yeah, no, because I'm dying to read it, because communication was not something I'm good at, right? And what do you feel are the kind of core collaboration things that you've seen engineers learn to do? Like in the book, like how do you see them learning patterns, and what are some of those sort of, give us a sneak preview of what I'm going to be reading about in terms of some of the winning patterns that work.
Well, we could have a look at the part one, which is the visual part. That's got quite a few really useful things in it, because, of course, we create diagrams an awful lot, don't we? So, but I'll give
Mm-hmm.
you an overview of the four parts. So the first one is visual, and so that's sort of basically about diagrams and graphs and other visuals, and it's got lots of patterns and anti-patterns for improving those. Then part two, I called it multimodal because it's got written in there, but it's also got verbal and non-verbal. So this
Oh.
is pulling pulling stuff in from like ancient Greece and stuff to help you out. That's part two. Part three is all about knowledge and documentation. So it's not just knowledge, not just documentation. Sorry, it's sort of pulling that together and kind of communicating the knowledge as well. And then part four, which people seem quite interested in at the moment, is the bit where we are looking at, really at the moment, the world is kind of remote, isn't it? And so it's all about communicating remotely and with distributed teams. So it talks about things like time zones and just ways that you can work with people who aren't in the same room. So
Mm.
part one is kind of the visual bit, is what I started with when I
Mhm.
initially sort of thought I want to kind of bring stuff together here. And I'd noticed that I was doing a lot of things with diagrams that other people weren't doing. And I could see that there were things that people were doing which were just sort of meaning that people couldn't really understand their diagram. And people tend to look at the visuals. If you've got a load of documentation, if there are diagrams in there, people are going to look more at those diagrams than they are at walls of text. And so we need to really make sure that the diagrams actually communicate what we want them to communicate and signpost people to more information, because you can't fit everything in a diagram. So
let me ask you then, that because the book just sort of jumped up to the front of my queue, because we talk about this all the time. And yeah, one thing really struck me when you were talking too is, in a number of classes that we've held and things like that, there'll be the executive sponsor for the class or whatnot will walk in and and say something to the team or whatnot. And your nonverbal communication just hit, just really struck a chord with me there, because we often say, did you notice the way they walked in? Right? Like the just that the positioning, the body language, the way they faced us and were confident in their voice and things of that nature. And I feel like a lot of that we just don't know. Right. IT doesn't teach us to do that. It's nerd to nerd,
yeah,
or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's very true. And of course, when we're speaking to each other via a camera, or maybe we can't even see each other at all, we either can't see body language, or we really have to struggle to understand body language. And so there's some things that you can do to help other people. And I split it into encoding information and decoding information, because there are other concepts that in software we understand those. And so we need to know that we need to encode things properly so that people have a chance to decode them properly. Because if you're doing things that you don't really mean, then people are going to misunderstand you. So
now, tell me about the visual communication, and I'll make this my last question, as much as I really want now the rest of another hour to do this, but we'll have you back. So you do teach classes in these things too, right? You offer opportunities to learn some of these communication techniques?
Yes, so especially with the visual things, I do a sort of 45-minute talk, but I also run 2-hour or half day or full day workshops on this. So if people want to do this more sort of practically with actual exercises, then we can do sort of half or full day workshops, rather than me just presenting lots of patterns and anti-patterns and you then having to do them yourselves. So people tend to like doing the more practical sort of full day workshop, because they really then get into it and get a chance to understand things and ask questions, and we can work on things together. And so that's quite fun.
I'm kind of ready to sign up for that myself. I don't know.
Some people even want to extend it further. So
I did want to ask you one other depth question though, and before I run out of time, and that was in the visual. So I see a lot of mistakes related to a visual design treated as a decision record. And, those are really different things. And so I wanted to see if I could get you to speak to, is the design the decision record? Is the decision, how do they relate, right? I've got a big picture of this is my architecture. And then you go, yeah, but why did you choose that thing? And then somebody says, I don't know, Tom did it.
One of the key things really is, when you're documenting these things, you need to link them together, because your diagram might show one decision or it might show many decisions. And so if your diagram has more than one decision in it, you should be putting in like a little note into it that says, look at architecture decision record 231 or something like that. And then then people will be able to answer that question and go, oh, why are those two services communicating with each other? And why aren't those two? And all the different things. So it's about linking them together, because you definitely need to put the why into some kind of decision record for anything that is significant to your design, any decision you make. You can't just put it in a diagram, but your diagram's probably going to have more than one. So don't be afraid to also like link to your diagrams or put them into your decision records, because then you've got that link. So link both ways. Is you want the transparency all through your documentation and your knowledge, so that you know that we made this decision and it's shown in this diagram and it's based on this requirement and this requirement and these constraints. So you want to link to everything so that people understand why you've made that, because then when things change, you can then look at it and go, that's changed a lot. We need to reconsider this and make sure we don't need to change this decision now. So very important to just link it all up. And that's one of the things that's often missing from the architecture katas, which I'm the head judge for with O'Reilly at the moment. We run these kata competitions once or twice a year, and teams enter it from all over the world. And that is where they have to create a GitHub repository of their sort of high level design for something over a period of a couple of weeks. And the thing that is often missing is that kind of path through, like why you've put decision records in and you've put diagrams in, but how do I connect this up?
So I seriously want to dive into decision records, and decision thinking is like it's to me that is the link, the what do we call it, the currency of architecture in a way. But I feel like that needs another episode.
Yeah, definitely.
Where can our listeners see or hear you next after this podcast?
Well, if they check out my website, which is JacquiRead.com, then you can see you can see what events that I'm going to be speaking at. I'm still speaking at a few conferences this year. I think I'm actually going to be speaking at 12 in total. That's just the conferences. If you look on there, you can also see when I'll be teaching with O'Reilly, and if I'm doing anything else, I will put that on my website, or you can find me typically on LinkedIn and Mastodon, which you can also find via my website as well. So come and find me there. I'm not really anywhere else.
Wow, this is great. I want to thank you so much for today. This has been an amazing episode. I really feel like I feel like I learned things. And a lot of podcasts we don't actually get into the meat of things. And this was very much like, now I know how to do something I didn't know how to do. So that was great. Brilliant.
Yeah, I'm very glad.
So thank you, everybody, for joining us for another episode of The Argument with Jacqui Read. As you can tell, I am a huge fan, and I hope to have her back soon. You can catch me at UberCon in Denver coming up on the 16th, 17th, 18th of July. And I will also be teaching a solution architecture course on August 27th online. It will be kicking off. You can find out more about that on isaglobal.org. And if you haven't joined our free Mighty Network, and the link will be in the video as well as in the post here. And we do monthly webinars on our body of knowledge, which is open source, and a whole bunch of other things. And Jacqui, I hope you'll come join us again for a deep dive into decisioning.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.